Now, the Johannesburg Crisis Alliance has raised concerns over reports of the new appointment of the city manager. According to the alliance, there are allegations that controversial Joburg property company, JPC, CEO Helen Botha is being considered for the role. Now, if the reports are true, she's expected to replace former city manager Floyd Brink, who was removed from his post earlier this month. For more on this, we're joined by the Johannesburg Crisis Alliance's Tessa Dooms. Tessa, thank you so much for joining us on AM Report this morning. Won't you just detail for our audience why it is exactly that the Johannesburg Crisis Alliance does not want Helen Botha as the city manager?
Well, as we all have experienced as residents of Johannesburg, the city has been in crisis in many different ways over the past few years. And a big part of this crisis is a housing crisis in general, but also a property crisis in terms of particularly the inner city. And Helen Botha has presided over many years of dysfunction in terms of the Joburg property company. We've seen scandal after scandal that has gone unaddressed by even previous administrations, and particularly this administration as well. We've seen the COVID tender scandal that she was embroiled in around the cleaning tenders. We've seen scandals more recently around billboard expenditure that has gone unaccounted for. And you're just seeing this pile on, particularly when you think about the inner city crisis and the buildings in the inner city. We all know that the inner city has been in a run-down state for a long time. It's been in ruin, and it's this increasing sense that nothing is being done. And this has real consequences for the residents of the city of Johannesburg, both in terms of the fact that we are losing out in terms of money that is purportedly being spent on infrastructure, on development, on renovations, on cleaning, on billboards. And we're not seeing the improvement in the city, but also in terms of real consequences for people's health and safety. The buildings in the inner city are becoming unlivable, but they are being, their neglect is leading to people actually living in those buildings illegally. We know about the hijacking of those buildings, and they're leading to deadly consequences like we saw last year in the Marshalltown fire, the Sidiso fire. And the Kampepe report that has been done on that after inquiry has finger-pointed Helen Botha particularly because of her neglect of that. That is a city building where 77 people died last year under Helen Botha's watch. And I think there's been too little accountability when it comes to Helen Botha, and we must ask questions about whether the politicians, why they still have so much faith in her when she has not delivered in the portfolio she is in right now.
Tessa, why do we have so many contested appointments to this position? I mean, Floyd Brink himself was, of course, marred with great scandal, and a lot of that, of course, even coming from the fact that he had flouted procurement processes and acquiring equipment worth around 320 million rand. So it's not as if the previous people in charge were also any good, really, to this position. Why is this always happening?
At the end of the day, the management and the running of the city is about multi-billions of rands in the hands of people. And it is a financial opportunity for anybody who wants to do corruption because the level of oversight is so low. We've seen that the leadership in the city, the political leadership in the city has been unstable for many, many years, has been less than competent in their ability to show oversight. And what we must remember about the city of Joburg is that the entities almost run as departments unto themselves. And so the management of the city is actually a very difficult and precarious thing to do. But I think that I'm starting to believe that precarity is on purpose. I think that there's a purposeful mismanagement of the city because there's so much money that can go, unaccounted for and can be misused. And I think there's a responsibility not only that the city political leadership has to actually find competent people to get the work done, to get the job of making the city done, but also at national level. I think that there's a real case to be made here for some serious administration and oversight over the city because the people that are being put in charge of almost 100 billion rand budget that if they maladminister, they can actually make tons of money for tons of people. And I think that lies at the core of what's going on and what's going wrong in the city of Joburg.
Yeah, I was about to say, because there's a footballing term that's called playing the ball and not the man here. And I only say that because if we changed the policies, particularly the oversight policies that you speak of, if those were strengthened, those were tied up, you'd probably have a situation where the people that are then applying know that there's a lot more stringent and oversight rules here, so they are unable to do any of the graft that we have seen happen thus far. Should that not be the first priority before just continuously changing who is at the head or the city manager?
I mean, absolutely. And that's part of what the Joburg Crisis Alliance has been stressing over the last year and a half or so, is that you actually need to think about what the oversight mechanisms are in cities, in municipalities. And that comes down to two things. Number one, it comes down to the councillors that we elect. We do not pay enough attention to the fact that we are electing people into council positions, not just to answer calls of residents when there's a pothole, but to actually hold accountable the people who are sitting with multi-billion rand budgets in their hands. If our councillors, and I've met so many councillors over the last 6 to 8 months, who will tell me that they are hearing information on the news and on the radio at the same time that we are, that they're hearing it at media briefings at the same time that we are. We have now in place a new coalition with a new speaker who is railing and trying to explain to us that she cannot get anybody to function on a political level for the accountability functions of the city. Our first port of call is to have political people that we've elected into office actually do their jobs as councillors, and then of course as the executive as well. We cannot just have coalitions that are being formed for the purposes of people to switch around positions and earn salaries. We are giving salaries to over 200 people at this point in political positions that are supposed to do the work of accountability. And yet when they go to their Section 79 committees to do that oversight work, we are barely getting reports. We are not even allowed in the room. You have to apply as a citizen to get into a room to see if the accountability is actually happening. And at this point, we're not getting any kind of feedback or any kind of report that the political principals are doing their job. And so it is a bigger issue than just changing around the people. We have to ask questions about why the political are the political principals that we have competent enough to use the rules to get the work done? And do the other people who are in the chain of command, does the Gauteng provincial premier, does he care about what's happening in the city of Joburg, or is he turning a blind eye? Does the Minister of Kochte care what's happening in the city of Joburg, or is she turning a blind eye? I really believe that we have an accountability crisis in this country because of political patronage in the main, and because we often talk about professionalization of the state. This is not about professionalization of the state. It's about depoliticizing the state and stopping this idea of political appointees being able to run roughshod, because the people we were elected to put there are more scared of the people that are there because they are their political patronage buddies than they are of us as the residents.
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people worry about at a time like this then is that it doesn't matter who you put in, but if you don't have the stringent and strict policies in place to actually make them be held to account, then you obviously would struggle then to begin with, because no matter who you put in charge then is going to be able to find those loopholes, and that's what we need to actually strengthen as well then. So where do we go from here? I mean, you can ultimately compel, go to court ultimately. Is that the next steps for yourselves?
Well, I mean, I think the best course of action and the first course of action for any resident is unfortunately political pressure rather than legal pressure. Because again, we've seen over the years, I've seen many activist groups and advocacy groups go and take these kinds of matters to court, take governance issues to court, win those court cases and find that nothing changes within the administration. And I think what this calls for is public pressure. It calls for us as residents to get familiar with the facts, to start putting public pressure and to start coming up as a united force as the residents of the city of Joburg. Right now, they get to do the things that they do because they're doing them largely in the dark. There's a lack of information. And I think we need to start organizing ourselves as the residents of the city of Joburg to start asking the hard questions, asking for accountability, and putting some political pressure at the highest levels. We need to actually take this matter. This city is in this kind of state where it could actually go into a state of disaster. Given the water crisis, given the electricity crisis, these entities are being run as fiefdoms. I mean, the Joburg Property Company has been run like a fiefdom. There's no actual entity that is in the department. There's no department that has got oversight. It's this company that is running on its own merits based on all of these political networks. What it's going to take here is more political will from the side of us as the voters and the residents than it's going to take legal action. And I think that the National Kochte Department, the president, everybody needs to start putting their eyes on the city of Joburg, because if Joburg goes down, the country will soon follow.